Hello, listeners, and welcome to another episode of the Untethering Shame podcast. I'm your host, Kira Wackett, and joining me today is Nic Scholtysik, a designer, serial expat, and belonging researcher. Her focus is on identity-related burnout, or the experience of over-identifying oneself with an aspect of what you do and the fear of becoming a cliche. Using the principles of design thinking and positive psychology, Nic helps her clients identify and create ways to take work-life control by answering the question, how do you want to come home to yourself? Now, this question is so powerful. A former interior designer, Nic worked on the product side of this, designing spaces and creating environments for people in which they can thrive. But the more time she spent in this work, the more she saw the necessity to dive deeper. It's more than just the room or space. It's about creating an awareness of who you are versus what you do or have, and creating space to explore that iteratively and progressively. In this episode, we're talking uncertainty, regret, unbalanced identity development, and the quest for self-embodiment and well-being. Because as much as our culture is stuck in the what, you are worth so much more, and it's time to focus on who you are so you can live more fully, freely, and authentically. Welcome, Nic. I'm so excited we're doing this 3-4 years after we recorded our episode together for your podcast. It's so cool to have had such a powerful connection to come back and do this now together.
Yes. Thank you so much, Kira. You hit me out of the blue when you contacted me and you said you're starting a podcast and you want me to be on your podcast. I was like, my first reaction, I was like, oh shit. Right? Oh, wow. Because I had such a powerful experience when you were on my podcast. Mm-hmm. And I keep referring, I have my top 3 podcast episodes that whenever I talk to people, I'm like, this or Kira's, pick it. And then you came back and I keep, opening your newsletter. And I was like, oh, this is so spot on every time. And then it's like, oh, you reach out to me and it's like, okay, this is real. Let's do this. But it took me a few days to reply to you.
Yeah. And I'm curious. So one of the ways I really like to start episodes is doing a one-word check-in. So just what is one word to describe how we feel? And so I'm curious, either thinking about that moment you open the email or right now, what's one word to just kind of encompass how you're feeling about the reconnection, this topic, where we're going, just what came up for you, what sat with you there?
So the first reaction was really like, oh shit.
Yeah.
The level of our conversation back then was high and it was so good. And I was like, okay, now part 2. Okay, this has to match. And then now I'm just excited. I mean, a little bit nervous, but also just really excited. And I can't wait for your questions.
Well, I think it is that piece of, I was reading Seth Godin has, so many books on creativity and entrepreneurship, but one of the things that he talked about in his book, The Practice, which I can't remember if it came out right before the pandemic or in the pandemic, but he talked about sort of the law of averages. And so there's this idea, he's written a blog post every day for 10 or 15 years or something like that. And he really thought about how, the brain is like, well, everything has to be as good or better as what I just produced. And so there's this chase for something. And that's really our shame. That's our ego. That's our fear of being irrelevant that gets in the way. And so it can stop us from producing greatness. And also just law of averages, most things that he produces will be average. There will be some that will be stellar, some that won't. And so I think there's always this gosh, I just want to show up. I want things to be what I want them to be. But then also when we can come down from that to realize this will be exactly what it's supposed to be because I'm going to show up fully. And it sounds like you kind of made that shift to the little imposter syndrome, a little shame, a little what do I have to say? And now I'm the guest. So I'm responsible for all this stuff, to now these are 2 people coming together who feel safe and heard with each other. And I think we both, I don't want to speak for you, but I know for me, what I really valued too is that I think you are somebody I can have a different thought or opinion around, and we just want to learn. And so the safety was built in to just make a conversation inherently be beautiful and wonderful. So it sounds like once you got past that, now it's just, let's do this. Now I'm just excited and our energy can vibe off each other.
Absolutely. And you said, fear of being irrelevant. I will get back to that later. But for me, it was really, with the history of me, what my life is. So often I cannot have a really deep or good or profound conversation for several reasons, and that might be sometimes, I live in a new country. I don't speak the language. Like I literally cannot speak the language. I cannot have this conversation, or it's the person, or it's the mood, or it's the circumstances. But there's just something really profoundly satisfying of having somebody to, okay, hear me out. I have this thought. What resonates with you? Where do you see, where do we differ? Let's get into this, right? And then just the availability, having people emotionally available to have another kind of conversation is rare.
Yeah. And it's interesting to me as you're saying that too, because I'm thinking about now the progression for you to have gotten to this place of really researching, embodying this idea of identity related burnout. And we talk a lot about that, and we'll kind of get into the specifics of what that means to you. But you got to this place of really recognizing for so many people, it's this overemphasis or this overinvestment in one part of the self. And it's this sort of clinging to having to be or do or perform in a certain way. And I think for most of us, we're just looking for connection. We're looking to feel seen, to feel safe, to feel heard. And that might happen through those aspects of our identity. But I think that's really where the confusion is. And so you leaning into this, you saying, regardless of what story I have, where I've come from, how I say it, whether I articulate it perfectly or not, I have something that deserves to be shared, and we deserve to have a conversation where we can explore what we think. But that takes a lot. It takes a lot of trust in the self, a lot of trust in the other person or the party that you're talking to, and really that release of expectation that we have to be performing and instead can just be present and engaging.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious. I'd love to tell us first, when you say identity burnout, when you kind of came to that place, what does that mean for you? How do you encapsulate that in your understanding?
Okay, so when I talk to my client, and I started off in interior design, right? Okay, how did I start this conversation? It was about the home. It was about the place. And It was like something outside of yourself. And I started with clients, and some clients, at the end of our process of our working together, all of them would have their home would be so much nicer than it was before. But some people were like happy, wide-eyed and like, oh my God, wow, amazing. And others were just like, yeah, okay. Yeah, it's great. Yeah. It's like, buying another chocolate bar. Yeah. Or, going to the restaurant. Yeah, it was a good meal. And like, okay, so, I was thinking, okay, where does this stem from? And then I happened to have a lot of expat clients, people who are foreigners in the country where they live in. And the conversations were simply different. So what home had to provide was a different thing than somebody who's always been a local and has been here and never questioned their own identity. And that being said, it was with those clients that I realized that they saw themselves as one kind of person. And then through the process, and then me asking different questions that were not just design related, but really about the experience of coming home to yourself, that they realized they were making a difference. There's a difference between having a role, right? And a role is something that you can play or that you step into, but that's something that you can take off like a jacket at the end of the day, right? And then is an identity that's something that's so integral of you, and you can't put it just down like that. And so they would, before we worked together, let's say, okay, I am Spanish, I am a mother, I am a successful businesswoman, and a wife, right? Let's say that's the four. And then while we work together and we're working on the home, they realize that a big part of their identity has become like this expat life, being a foreigner. And there is like also the stigma from others, like you are not from here, and it's kind of internalized. And you know how we were, maybe, I don't know if that's the same in the US, but when I was little, I was, told like stranger danger. And there's a difference. You can be a foreigner. You can be the person who is not originally from here, but now belongs here. Or you are a stranger, and that means you will be always different. You will never be part of this. People need to be careful when they deal with you. And that becomes like part of your identity. So my clients figured out that this expat piece, this foreigner stranger part, is much bigger than they ever thought. Like it really gets to them. And they needed to be something like, I need to have this mix of being this person that I'm here in this culture. Maybe they are in a, multicultural marriage. Like I am part this, but I'm also part this. And which parts do I take? And how do I want to mix this? And so that's how I got to it. And there's different patterns for different people, like what is their main identity? And then I see, and it's completely subjective. I don't have any data to support this, just my clients that I work with. There's certain patterns of how they feel empty and how they feel full in this identity.
It's really interesting because what you're describing, I think, is both chosen over identification with something. And so maybe a certain part of ourself that we kind of lean into, intentional or not. And so that could be your job, that could be your relationship with somebody, this part of yourself that you are sort of knowingly investing a lot of yourself in, or maybe confusing who you are with this role. You're gluing the jacket to yourself in a way. But then there's also these roles or these parts of the self that are very, I think, subtly under the radar, can become really big. So the expat piece being one of them for so many people, of not realizing just what a toll that takes to constantly be navigating, do I belong or am I on the outside? I don't want people to perceive me this way, but also I don't maybe align with certain things. And am I always going to view myself as a foreigner? Can I claim that I belong? So there's this I think about like on your phone or on a computer, when you have just so many apps open or things running in the background, like that is so much noise in the background that just is draining. And so it sounds like for you, just becoming aware of the multidimensionality, if that's an actual word, of people and all the aspects of themselves, and seeing where things weren't in balance and what that looked like and how that was affecting people, or even just the fact that so many people hadn't had the invitation to even question the balance, to even look at the roles, to consider the jackets versus the self, that was this thing that felt like a much bigger topic that you needed and you felt called to go deeper on for your clients, but also just as a greater understanding for the world at large.
Yes. That's all I could say.
Yeah. Well, so then what was the shift then? Because you went from interior design work and again, really thinking about the external, which is such a beautiful metaphor, to the identity piece and external reinforcement, validation, approval, rejection, all the stuff that we internalize, everybody else's opinions, perceptions. It's similar in vein to the how we design the space in which we live and what we put in the room versus who are we when we walk into that room. And so it sounds like an easy enough transition to then kind of do the work you're doing now, but how did you make that leap? Because there was still a big shift in terms of how you're getting a client, the goal with the client, and also probably having to work through some resistance with clients to do this work. Because even if, I see this in the therapy room all the time, people know they're in pain. They know something's going on. They know that they don't know who they are or how they want to show up, or they feel out of balance, but that doesn't mean that they're ready to take the work on. That can be a really challenging next layer. So how did you bring all that together and decide to make the transition now into the work that you're doing?
So that was absolutely, totally selfish reasons on two levels. One, I was really bad at making design a profitable business, in the sense that once I started this work with clients, a lot of them, like, I did the designs and they loved it and it's great. And then a lot of them realized, you know what? As much as I love the design and doing the thing, it's actually not that important.
Yep.
The money that was going to put in this, I'm going to use it for something else. And then on the other hand, I just love getting those emails, like 3 weeks later, it's like, wait a second. I love the design, but I have so many questions. I need to work through things. Like, you moved so much in me. Like, I need to feel myself. And then, like, another 4 months later, oh my God.
Yeah.
I decided I do this. Thank you so much. So you get these amazing emails, and it's emotionally super satisfying because, some cry, some laugh, some cry and laugh. And it's like, oh my God, this is so great. It feels just, on a human level, so satisfying. But then on the business level, it's like, okay, I don't care if you go through with this. Like, what do I care if you buy a new table and it's round or it's rectangular? Is it marble or is it wood? Like, I don't give a crap. I just want you to feel good. So, I always said to my clients, like, you love your home as much as you love the life that is happening within. And if that life is not happening how you want it to be, then we can adjust really little things.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, oh my God, I didn't even need all this. I just needed to, three for just the volume up, the bass down, like little adjustments, and then I'm good to go. And it's like, of course, cool, great. So I wanted to have more of these great experience of people really liking the results. And quite frankly, I need to make money.
Yeah. Well, you were literally talking yourself out of making money with people because you were asking the questions to steer their work and their goal in a different direction, which was what you cared about and where your energy lied and what was truly the problem to solve in the moment. It wasn't, how do we make this room feel better, look better? It was, that's great. That's still, we just bought a house 2 months ago now, and we have 2 rooms that are completely empty. We don't have any furniture in them right now. And when we were first moving in, it was like, all right, we're going to need to get, the 1,000,007 different things. We got to design these spaces, do all this stuff. And sure, that stuff is still important. But the biggest thing for us was the transition we've been able to make as a family coming into this space, the intention of our values, who we are, the sort of invitations, as there's a lot of change happening in our life at the same time we got this house. And now you're realizing, like, our living room has one wall that's floor to ceiling windows. It's beautiful and it looks out into our backyard. So it's very private. And we have literally no living room furniture. And so it just has become almost like a makeshift yoga studio, a little creative space. And it's this interesting experience when you just are in the home. And I feel so grounded and rooted and excited to be here because who I am, I've done the work to allow that to show up. And so I think you started to see that for people, and you were inviting that of, again, I can sell you a lamp, I can tell you which one I would do, the circle table or the square table or whatever. And you oftentimes, I talk about them as Band-Aid solutions. You're putting Band-Aids on an internal wound. We're just putting glitter on a shit covered wall because we don't yet even know who you are and how you want to show up. We're doing things that are still embodying the performance. And so I think it's powerful that you're acknowledging, obviously, you have to make money, you have to do these things. That's a business perspective. And also you probably could have pushed that spark and that interest away and made money and made a lot of money, because there are so many people that are still chasing the Band-Aid, but your integrity and your values were such that you couldn't feel good about making money doing something that you knew wasn't really helping people come home to themselves. And so I guess one of the things I think about is a lot of the work that I do now, I think there's been a personal connection to where I've had to go in my own journey. Was this so true to you, so authentic to you because you experienced this yourself? Like you had to move through that process of external to internal rooting and becoming the you that can stand here? Or was it something different that led you to this path?
Yeah. I mean, what I do now is just the accumulation of my life's history, right? So I remember from our first conversation when you were on my podcast, I realized while we were recording why my business is called the way it is, right? So my business is called A Home Worth Having. And while we were having this conversation, you asked me some questions, and I remember the scene of my teenage life where I needed to find, safety and rescue. I couldn't go home. The situation was too unsafe, and I was at somebody else's house. So some other kid from my class, and I really didn't like that kid so much, but they had very nice parents, and I knew I could just go there and show up, and the mother wouldn't let me in. Yeah, exactly. She was the kind of person like, sure, come in. So I remember that scene where I'm sitting with the mother in the kitchen and we're having a conversation, and then my so-called friend, so my classmate, comes in and is just shocked that I'm sitting there having this perfectly nice conversation, like the cuckoo's nest, like the cuckoo in somebody else's nest, right? And she's like, what are you doing? Like, don't you have a home of your own to go to? And I was sitting there thinking, like, I do, but not one worth having. And that's just like, boom, like in that moment when we recorded this, like there is one side of a home, and it can be pretty, but it can be unsafe.
Yep.
And then there's one who gives a fuck what it looks like. And when what you call the Band-Aid, right, is what I called borrowed style. So people come to a designer, right? People come to a designer, and the way it usually works is, so the designer has a portfolio, has a certain style, is known for something certain. And you're like, oh yeah. And you project yourself and it looks, I don't know, happy or calm or whatever. And you can't recreate it by yourself. So you ask that person to do it for you. And of course there's a process and they listen to you, but it remains usually the style that the person is known for, which is then as a designer, I have to interpret the information that you give me as a client. And then I kind of superpose my style on you and your solution. Of course, there's, certain adjustments, but it all remains just performative, because what you want is that perfect image of, in comparison to, I look like that. And sometimes it's other people, sometimes it's your past, sometimes it's I don't know what, right? And then it's just, it is borrowed style, because it's not your style, it's that other person's style, and it's just performative. And there's a beauty of what you described in your home, when you give yourself time and you don't design everything instantly, because you come in with a notion and an idea pre-made, and it has to be like this, because traditionally this kind of room is, I don't know, a dining room or a living room or whatever, and it has to be used in a certain way. And if you give yourself time, then it turns out to be this yoga studio, and it's, it's like so completely out of, like people might come in, it's like, wait a second, oh, so you don't have a living room, or this is not what used to be now. The main room is not your living room. It's actually, interesting, right? But then it becomes your solution.
Right.
It's your thing because it fits your life.
Right.
And there's just a beauty of organically discovering what this room will become. But first of all, you do like, okay, like, what can I do here? Who am I in this space? And what makes sense, even though I don't have the wallpaper, even though I don't have all the furniture, even though I don't have all the lamps or the lighting or whatever, right? So, yeah.
I love that term, borrowed style. And I think so much of it too is, whether it's if I get this job, if I climb the corporate ladder, if my body is this size, or if I present a certain way, then I will be happy. Then things will be okay. And what is the sort of subliminal messaging of it is, if I can paint a clear enough picture for everybody else that they see this, maybe they won't see the cracks. Maybe they won't see the uncertainty. And I think that there's a degree of, because I'm fighting that every day. Again, we've only been here 2 months, but in my head, we've been here 2 months. So everything should be settled. I should be able to keep up with this yard. And in the meantime, I've never owned a home before. I grew up moving all the time, almost every year, and just navigating sort of the chameleon-esque nature that I had as a kid. I created a perfect way to fit in with everybody else so that I could have a false sense of belonging, because I would rather fit in and be performing than be rejected for being who I was. And quite frankly, I didn't know who I was because I was constantly being picked up and moved to different places. And so as I've kind of leaned into this discomfort when somebody comes into our house, like we have neighbors that this whole neighborhood here, I've never experienced this, but everybody likes each other. They all look out for each other. People come over and they bring cookies and their kids want to play. And my 3-year-old is getting invited to play dates with kids. And so we had people come over last night and they walked in, and all I wanted to do was apologize that my house didn't look the way that it quote unquote should. And I stopped and I was like, this house looks exactly the way that my family needs and wants it to be right now. If I apologize, that's my shame. That is my shame, saying that who I am as a person, who I am as a homeowner, as a parent, as a partner is not good enough because it's not reflected in the walls. But that's 10 plus years of shame resilience work. And I still will catch it. The trick is not that you get rid of it, but now I can catch it and I don't act on the shame space. And so it sounds like that's a lot of what you're trying to help people explore is, where are we performing? Where are we trying to create a picture idea of success, happiness, whatever it is? Because in our head, maybe that's the only way we can feel a little bit okay. And how do you create enough of a gap to tolerate the tension to actually figure out what that is inside of you? Which means rooms that, I reserve the right that this room could be a yoga studio for 6 months or a year. It might become a living room in 6 months or a year. It might become a completely different room than, those things. And so really just allowing space, which I think as humans, we struggle with, and particularly the people that you are drawn to, which are likely people that have been chasing that sense of rooting their whole life, but have only been able to source it in glimpses by performing with the borrowed style, the borrowed, fitting in, the borrowed performance, whatever that looks like.
Absolutely. And the thing is with the cracks, and sometimes we just fill the space that we're given. And it never crosses our minds that, wait a second, I can claim space, more space than I am. Somebody says like, oh, this is a crack, fit in here. And you're like, sure. I'm like, putty paste. And I'll be like, yeah, right? Or like, no. I actually need more space. Or the other way around. A lot of people who are very affluent and have all the money and can do it, like, oh, I have the means to claim so much space.
Right.
And then they're not happy. And like you don't have to. Just because you can, it doesn't mean you have to. Right? So me being European, I remember when I lived in the US, the concept of having a second living room was like, wait,
what?
why would you, my first was like, why would you do this to yourself? So you have one for the family that is quote unquote messy, and then the other one is just for show. And when people come, no, like, no.
Yeah.
Right. And with everything that's going on in the world and sustainability, first we need to earn money. Then the new capital was, I'm somebody who has time. And the next thing will become, with, I don't know how many billions we are on the planet, is space, right?
Yeah.
And people are like, I need to have space. And, in order to be rich or wealthy or whatever you want to call it, as much as possible. But why? Like, wouldn't it be cool if you, like, I could, if I wanted to, but I actually don't need to. I don't have this inner pressure of owning so much or taking up so much space if a smaller space makes you happy.
Yeah. And I think the question for so many people is, at least that I get afraid of and that I've had to work through, is what does make you happy? Because from the time you're born, we're fed ideas of what will make us happy. And so it's not often that people, I think, are given the same sort of breath and space that we want to create for them in the work we're doing to just sit with that question. Because I think a lot of times the clients that I have now, they're like, I don't know. I don't know what makes me happy. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I want. But there's this fear of, if I start questioning things, I'm afraid my feet won't find the floor again. I'm afraid that I won't know how to root to myself. What if by asking these questions, I blow up my life and then I don't know what my life is supposed to look like? And I think that is that piece when we think about identity. It's going back to the notion of where you live, what you do, these sort of external parts of the self. They can be jackets that we take on and off. And it's okay to try on different jackets. Do you need, a 7,000 square foot home, or do you really only need 1,500 square feet or 800 square feet? And what does that look like? And how have we come to be told happiness and fulfillment and joy and connection are defined? And are there ways that are more authentic to who we are? And so how do you help people do that? Like, what is as you are doing this work, as you're in very much, I think, the discovery and application phase in duality and really constantly learning from your clients, from your research, how do we begin to make that shift from performing and chasing and borrowing to authentically questioning and making that pivot?
Yeah. So there's two things. So on the one hand, I just help internationals that moved from place A to place B. Mm-hmm. People that most of the time got headhunted or were good enough to apply in a different country for a job, even though they don't speak the language, or, Mm-hmm. So then it becomes it's all about cultural adaptation. They are perfectly fine to make a living, but fail to build a life. Right? And so many expats then just, after a year or so go home. Or you have a couple and one has, you have a couple and they live the same life. They share a life together, but have a complete different experience because one is at work, has to perform, probably the sole earner, has the pressure of being the new person, new culture, and it's very much an overload. And the other one is sitting at home and is bored out to death.
Yeah, lonely, isolated.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Doesn't know anybody. Has the husband to come. It's usually, like, I'm stereotyping here, but it's still more often the husband who mm-hmm. has the job, and then the wife is the homemaker. And mm-hmm. with expat families, it's very often that the other partner has at least the same degree, or is, when it comes to women, has a higher degree or is overeducated, and then can't find, a job or something else to do in this place. So in that case, it's all about dealing with the frustrations. And I do not have to tell anybody what the locals are like. Like, I currently live in Sweden. We moved here a year ago. I don't need to tell anybody what the Swedish are like. or how to deal with Swedes or, whatever, like here are the 10 to-dos to make a Swedish friend. That's not what it's about. It's all about the person and like, where are you frustrated? Because in your home culture, you were a certain person with a certain identity and certain roles. And let's take the topic of friendship, right? You knew how to be a good friend, the American way.
Mm-hmm.
And then Swedes have a different approach. They are, in America, extrovertedness is celebrated. And in Sweden, it's introvertedness. And all of a sudden, you being all smiley and asking questions and saying hi to everybody, people reply and are polite and are nice, but are more like, she's a lot.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
And so what's the point in me telling you, Swedes are like this, that, or are like that? No, you just need to deal with your frustration and maybe pay, attention to who reacts positively, but maybe not the American way of just as extroverted as you are, right? Or like what else can you do? Or like, how else do you like to be as a person? What do you value about yourself? And can you put forward maybe in a different way and just explore yourself new in this new environment? Right? There's my American me. And then there's now I'm an American in Sweden. Like, how can I make right? So it's about dealing with frustrations and finding other ways. And then you still spend time alone and exploring, but it becomes more fun because, you just get to be you and different. It's like, right? What can I change? But not in the sense of I have to, or else I'll be lonely forever. It's just like, okay, what other identities have I not explored because that wasn't a given in the other place that I lived in.
And I think I was thinking about this as you were talking, because obviously I am in the US. I've spent my whole life in the US minus very brief, few weeks here and there in different countries. And so one of the things that I think we're scared to explore, can be really difficult to explore too, is, so maybe you are more extroverted or you present more extroverted, but how do you know if that's who you are as a person or what you've been conditioned to be and how you've been conditioned to act based on the fact that, I'm 35. If I spend 35 years in a country that really values extrovertism, how do I know that that's not just a learned behavior? And so I think this is where I think it's a little bit like overwhelming for people of like, well, do I just question everything? There was a show years ago that I love it because I think I watched it at such a pivotal time, but now I've gone back and watched it and I realize there are so many problems and sort of oppressive things that happen. But the show is called Gilmore Girls, and it was this mom and daughter. And she has this scene in there at one point, the mom does, where she's like, do I even like Pop-Tarts, or do I only like Pop-Tarts because my mom told me I couldn't have Pop-Tarts? Do I like wearing my hair this way? Do I like suddenly everything became a question and sort of a rediscovering of her relationship with it. And again, we're not saying that everything about how somebody shows up in the world is performative and not who they are. But I think what you're saying is, what would it be like to expand beyond that, to explore that, or to allow, there's a difference with how we act versus who we are. And so you can still be that person that is authentic and honest and gets energy from people around you and really thrives on deep conversation and wants to have that. You don't have to hide that to now be this other version because you've moved to another country. And how do you blend those two aspects of yourself? How do you explore different behaviors that can allow you to enact that part of who you are? And I think that is the shift for so many of us is, again, what we do, not just work, whatever, but our actions, our connections, the ways that we are showing up in the world are manifestations of who we are. And so I'm introverted in a country that values extroversion. And so I learned how to do that. I'm very good at it. I think that's why I'm good at speaking, is, and I also like it better because I'm absorbing everybody's energy as an empath, but I'm not having to hear all the stories. So it's like the perfect balance. I've got the performative nature of being able to talk and to seem all, bubbly and excited and all these things. But I also just really am ready to turn off the camera or walk off the stage and take some time to myself. And so having to realize how often is, again, what we're doing and how we're showing up, that way of being, I might not have to do that in another place. And I think that's what you're inviting people to explore, whether it's moving to a different country, different cultural norms and ideals, but also just, again, coming home to themselves, even if they stay in the exact same place they've lived their entire life. It's just the willingness to explore and to be open to the fact that who we are and how we show up in the world is an iterative process. It changes, it evolves over time. And it's okay to question that and to find the balance between authenticity and really embodying our full self in ways that aligns with maybe the community, cultures, groups around us.
Yeah. So I have one more thing to add to all of this. So when I talked just a few minutes ago about cultural adaptation and dealing with frustration, so the obvious lack of things, and the belonging is not just the part that other people give us, like as a reward, because we've been a good girl or a good boy. It's also how we give. Like all of a sudden we're missing. Like I used to be so good at making friends. I used to be this and that person, and all of a sudden I can't give because people receive differently, and I can't figure out how they receive. Right?
Yes.
But then there is this other aspect also. I don't know how it is in the US, but here in Europe, I remember growing up and my parents' generation looking upon people in their midlife, and when they went into crisis. So this term midlife crisis was a thing, and it was a bit smiled upon because these people that went into a midlife crisis were those kind of people that were supposed to be like considered as successful. They made it in life. On paper they have everything, and all of a sudden they either throw it overboard and start from scratch and build a new career, and I don't know, like it's this massive break, or they start doubting themselves, and then back double, I don't know, double add on what they already were doing, just in such extensive way. Like it's not just a sports car, but it's like a Porsche blah 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 vintage, like it becomes this excessive over pronunciation of whatever they were good at, right? And then they have to they doubt themselves, like, wait a second, what I've been doing so far, is it really what I want to do? And some make this break and then totally start a new life, and they're like, wait, what are you doing? But he used to be so successful as XYZ, and now he's becoming what? So it's this downgrading, exchanging for something, and then then backing up and going double and triple for things like I don't know, golden doorknobs. Do you really need golden doorknobs? But you can, right? These kind of things. In this term, really right now that I am in this midlife age, isn't really used anymore, right? And it's more this, people are more aware, there's more education around it, that it's what used to be called midlife crisis is just this really thin line between being burned out on the one side, having too much to do and being stressed, and we all know what burned out is, and then bored out because you have nothing else to do. The other areas of your life are so empty, you didn't put any effort in there, so that even if you wanted to, come home to yourself and leave work at work, you can't, because there is not much, right? There is not much to work with. And this is a tension, like holding these two things. Like on the one hand, I'm really stressed out, burned out. I have too much to do. I don't know even where to start. On the other hand, I still don't know what to start, but I have basically nothing. I've not been investing. I've been not, right? And who am I even if I'm not my title? If I'm not whatever your identity you identify with, like the main identity. We all have different roles and different identities, and many at the same time, but it kind of needs to be balanced. And if you just put everything in that one basket and nothing in the others, or just crumbs, and then this one basket just simply becomes too heavy, and you're like, oh, you don't even know how to shift, right? So that is another aspect of my life when theoretically they have everything, but it's still not good enough, or it's still not satisfying. Well, what do we do with this, right? So there was another kind of client that I had where it's like, okay, I open to me asking questions about this, and where do you want to shift to?
Yeah. I mean, and I think so much of this is, and it as I think whether we're producing data or, writing scientific papers, when you're in this field, in this work, we're always researching, or sort of that's the goal, is to always be researching, meaning that openness to keep refining the work and the question and the goal and the focus. And it just seems like all those different layers. And I think it's, again, as you're saying it, I'm having these aha moments of just little ways where, again, the over identification, and now the I can't be this, I can't do this, or I have to be this way, or I have to do that, or now me as a person is rejected in this new place and I can never belong. There's all these, they're quick summations of an experience without that exploration of what if, or how might I show up? How might I adapt? How might I be myself in this new place? And so there's a lot of, this is the principles of design thinking, and a lot of what you're kind of thinking about within positive psychology and the reframes. And so it sounds like so much of it is the exploration of self in an open way, without the emphasis on an answer, but the emphasis on exploration. And I think that's a testament to the work we could all be doing, which is just, what if you didn't have an answer right away? What if the question for the rest of your life is, how might I, or what if, or how can I continue to explore being X, Y, and Z? I'm curious because I know, pulling all this together, thinking about, the people listening to this and their minds kind of having those little light bulb and then full out explosion moments as they're thinking about this for themselves. What do you want to leave them with? What is that next step or that next question? If they're like, okay, this is all hitting me. And again, I have that fear of, if I start to take my feet off the floor, if I start to ask these questions, if I start to think about these things, I'm afraid of not coming back down. And so what's the next 1% of the work we can give people listening to this as they walk away today?
So what I like to focus on, I'm very much an advocate for attacking this whole monster, right? From the side, again, positive psychology, not like when you're already tired and depleted, focusing on what is not working and getting even more depleted, focusing on something that is not doing great. It's like, okay, which are the areas in your life that are really good? How can we make them great? Because simple maths, we all have 24 hours per day. If you spend 5 minutes every day more on what is good, right? Then with time, you add, every week 5 minutes, the good outweighs the bad. And then it's sometimes like, you'll be like, oh, I did so much goodness. Oh, I can attack like that small part that is not so great. Let's see. Yeah. Do I need to tackle it at all? Okay, I do need to. So now I have more bandwidth. I have more resilience because I, filled my tank with other good stuff. Yeah. So when you say explore, I really, really like this word. I call my clients explorers, but it is a neutral word. But some people will have the reaction of, oh God, exploration, it's work, right? It's more work, it's uncovering, and it feels negative. And someone like, oh, exploring, that sounds playful. I don't even remember when I was playful the last time. So for me, it's always a question like, okay, where do you feel enthusiasm in your life? Because most people don't even know where to look, right? And where it's just like, where do you have this feeling of enthusiasm? And it depends on how you live through the experience of enthusiasm. I'm a very much extroverted person. So for me, it's always enthusiasm is loud, it's laughing, you can see it, right? And it's like it's something shared. But for you, it might be, oh, enthusiasm is really like closing the door and enjoying the silence and, I don't know, putting on quiet music and being for myself. But then really explore okay, let's start there. What does enthusiasm look like for you? Where have you been enthusiastic? And then to the point that it doesn't matter if you're introverted and you enjoyed it by yourself, or you're extroverted and you already experienced enthusiasm with other people. It's like enthusiasm fills you up and gives you, like, it makes you overflow. And then you want to share, even if it was a moment by yourself, like, oh, I really had this really nice moment with quiet and this and this and that. I need to tell you about it, right? And then you automatically share it. Like, it gives you this connection. It starts with connection to you, but it always overflows then to connection with others. And then usually the people that come first into your mind, right? It's like, oh, my friend Amber in California would really like that. Right. I should leave her a message. Oh, like you might go negative. It's like, oh, but she's in California. She's not in Europe anymore. Or I miss her, blah, blah, blah. Like, no, wait. I would just send her a message, a voicemail, and it's 9 hours difference. When she wakes up, she has a note from me saying, look, girl, I really miss you. I had this moment. I felt enthusiastic and I thought of you. Right? I mean, who doesn't want to hear that? And then who wouldn't get back to you? Like, right?
Yeah.
And that's like how you start the upward cycle.
Yes. And I think very much so you breaking it down. And that's really the principles of positive psychology. And again, really thinking about how do we design systems that work for us as a big focus has to be the agreement to move away from immediacy of, I need to fix this all right now. I need to feel good right now. But instead realizing we're going to spend the rest of our lives asking these questions. How do I come home to myself? Who am I when I come home to myself? How am I evolving? How am I changing? What's important to me? What is enthusiasm? What is fulfillment? That's going to change as we get older. If that was 18-year-old me answering that question, it's very different than 35-year-old me with a 3-year-old. And so thinking about now the enthusiasm comes from 30 minutes to myself after I put my daughter to sleep and just having a moment to catch up on something for myself or just read in silence for a minute. And I feel this completely different wave of connection, or conversations like this. But again, what that looks like, reserving the right that this truly is a lifelong explorative process and we don't have to have the answers right away. And so for people listening, I think taking the time to ask these questions and releasing the urgency that you have to have a solution and feel better, because that's your shame. That is your shame saying you are broken, something's wrong. There's a risk if you don't put the smile back on your face and have all the answers. So I love this conversation. I love where you're going. This is just such an incredible way to see how you've evolved too. I mean, just the fact that you've allowed each opportunity in your business and your personal life to come together to really inform how you want to continue to show up. And so I have links to all of your details. I don't do anything myself on social media anymore, but I pop on Instagram and I follow like 8 people and I love to just watch what they're doing. And it's been so amazing to watch you and that's why I felt like I had to reach out. Not only was it the beauty of our conversation from, again, I think 3-4 years ago, but it was truly it's the beauty in your embrace and how you connect and the energy that you put out in the world. And so listeners, go to those links. I'll also put a link to our original podcast recording that we did on Nic's podcast down in the show notes as well. So you can check that out and maybe get a feel for where we were at that point, and also the continuity. And so much of what we're talking about now really showing up in that conversation as well. Nic, I'm curious before we say goodbye for today, because I'm assuming we have to repeat these conversations, even if it is every 3 or 4 years. Yeah. Is there anything else that you feel like you just want to either leave here, so you're not taking it with you, or that you want to invite listeners to take with them today?
When you were just talking right now, I thought, this is so funny. You're talking about not being on social media and following me.
Yeah.
Like my reaching people with my followers, I'm like down to 400 people per month because I don't post. I only post when it feels good. Because for me, I always kept preaching, right? Real life takes
precedence,
takes the upper hand, precedence over showing up. And again, from a business point of view, I probably should post more, but I really can't, I can't be bothered. But at the same time, untethering shame. I deal with this all the time as well. I help other people with their issues and whatever comes emotionally up, but it doesn't mean that I have my emotions under control all the time. And I can just give this example. So yesterday was my birthday. As we record this, yesterday was my birthday. And I've been here for a year in this country. And I've put so much effort in building this life because I want Sweden to be my last country. I want to finally feel this, belonging and rooted and settled and have my community. And I've been putting so much effort in meeting people, listening, being a good friend, and making them trust me, right? Like listening to what is it, they need. So and is that something I can provide? And do I like this person? So I would very much like to provide this. So again, belonging is a lot about what we can give to other people to make us feel good. Like, I can be this person for you. And so I had people over and we were around, I have no clue, 15, 20 people. And I was like amazed, like in a year's time, I have more guests at my party after 1 year than I had in the previous place where I lived before in 7 years. Right. And I was so happy. All these people came and they were all good people. And what I said, how I will make friends, like how I will decide if I want a person to be my friend is when I can. The first thing that comes into my mind, obviously, is like something good. Like I will not have people that will annoy me, will drain me, where I feel like, oh yeah, she's a such and such, and it's going to be a negative thing. So if I can brag about my people, and I made a conscious effort, so most of them didn't know each other, like, so what I can say about this person, and I was bragging about how cool they are, and then I bragged about this person and everybody was laughing, like, oh, you really you really sell us to everybody. I'm like, no, I just want you to know that I hang out only with cool people, and that you're cool. So I want you to know that everybody else is also cool here. But anyways, so everybody went home and I had just good feedback. But because I was so occupied with being a good host and providing the food and opening doors, right, playing the host, I felt I was not being a good friend during the time that they were here, because usually I'm the one asking questions and making sure they feel seen and heard. And I didn't have that much time because all of a sudden I had them all here at the same time and I had so much to do. And I felt like, oh my God, like I went to bed wondering if I should be disappointed in myself because I didn't show up to each and every one like I usually do, like my version of being a good friend.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, But then what I got back from everybody as a feedback was that because I had put in all the effort and showing up as I did, they could then have these conversations that they usually have with me amongst each other. Right? And I was like, okay, I think that is something that I can be proud of. Like I created my own little culture. I'm the one asking deeper questions, and they felt free to ask other people deeper questions and answer, or, like opening up more. And I think like, okay, you know what? I'll choose to be proud of myself. It's just been a year. I had 15 people here. Everybody thought like, had a really good conversation. It didn't stay shallow. Brilliant. Like this is all I can really hope for. And I'll take it. I'll take it and I'll run with it. So these feelings of, am I good enough? Did I do everything that I should be doing? They keep coming up, and they keep coming up with me all the time. And I will have to recalibrate and right. But they don't go just away. But it's, your podcast is so needed. So needed.
Oh, well, I love what you just said. And thank you for that. I think that, it's easy to think about all the things that we should be doing or need to be doing. And even as you started to celebrate, like, wow, I have, whether it was 15 or 50 or 5 or even one friend, you're reflecting on creating roots and connections and the authenticity of it. And then I think seeing that, again, the sort of the identity piece, like your role, often you assume a responsibility to be the one asking questions, to make sure people feel connected, to keep those conversations. And then you realize you can release that. You can just be present. You could be, maybe you liked hosting, maybe you didn't. And so next time you go, I want to be more in the conversation, but you can allow that, and you can start to lean in and trust that. And it's easy for our shame to then come in and say, oh, well, you didn't do enough of this, or this wasn't good enough, or you need to have more friends, or, whatever those things are. And instead you pause and you go, I've been here a year and I felt rooted to myself and my community at my birthday party. And that's really lovely. And that's something that I've worked really hard to create. And I will continue to explore and ask questions. Right now, I'm going to give myself the opportunity to just feel enthusiastic about that, and to be excited about that, and to continue to do the work. But part of the work is also knowing when to pause. And so I love that. And I think for all of us, just as we kind of come to a close, realizing that a lot of this work, again, it's a lifelong process, and that requires us to pause and take note of the changes and the moments that feel good, and the times, a lot of it for me is just even recognizing, even if I still act out of shame, even if I still perform, even just to celebrate the fact that I notice it now, because me 5 years ago, me 10 years ago wouldn't have noticed it because it was such an automatic response. And so again, just breaking it down and noticing the progress. Okay. This has been wonderful. Again, listeners, please check out those links. Nic has so much to offer. And I think, again, just is somebody that truly embodies the idea that we're all learning and growing. And she's not afraid to ask hard questions to herself and to other people. And that is something that I think all of us could do more, to have people like that in our lives. So connect with her, see what she's doing. If you are ready to do some of that work, get on her coaching schedule. Nic, this has been lovely. Thank you so much. I can't wait to do it again. And listeners, I will see you here next Sunday.